it's like an untapped emotional development that we have as humans. That's the only way I can describe it. It wasn't that they had to just be coached by me. It was that they needed to take responsibility for their emotional state. And I didn't realize this until I realized that I was really struggling with my own emotional issues in romantic relationship
Mm-hmm.
and had kind of become voiceless and avoidant and had these really weird tendencies that were harmful to me and others that I never really looked at. And so I realized I never looked at it because everybody else had the same thing. So it's this very common line that we all walk. And when I figured out how to overcome that myself, calling it what it was, I was emotionally unsober.
Welcome to the CoachMD Podcast. I'm Dr. Charles Glassman, bringing you 3 decades of experience as a physician and a coach. Join us as we navigate the maze of medical advice with real-life stories, empowering you to take charge of your health. In our That Happens segment, guests share transformative experiences, reminding us that we're all human and not just patients. So get ready for a journey into healthcare reimagined, where empowerment and discovery pave the way. Hey, it's Dr. Charles, aka CoachMD. In my over 30 years of medical practice, I made it my goal to help people create a strong mind, a healthy body, and an unshakable spirit. And that's why I started the CoachMD podcast, because it was always my goal to help people, not to help them take care of themselves, give them the tools. And because we know that people, once you empower people, they're not just patients coming to a doctor to be fixed or to help the doctor take care of them. It was never my understanding, or really what I liked about being a doctor, was the idea that people would come to me hoping that I would take care of them. So I started the CoachMD podcast and CoachMD in general so that I could bring people information, empower them so they can take care of themselves in the fullest way to live a fully satisfying life. And that's why I became known as a Coach MD, because when my patients would come to me, it would be more like a coaching session rather than, okay, take this medication, take that medication. So the Coach MD podcast is all about bringing you guests who incorporate that in their own lives, and also if they're medical practitioners, in the lives of the people who come to them looking for help. And my guest today is Dr. Andrea, who is a chiropractor. And I've had a very good relationship over the years with chiropractors, both in my personal and professional life. I've been fortunate enough to know several in my local community who I've gone to, who I've referred patients to. And chiropractic looks at a person in a different way than a conventional Western trained medical doctor. But also, Andrea brings something different to the table. Okay. There's something that we look to in order to live fully satisfying, fulfilling lives that are purposeful and full of passion. It's bringing a mindset, an attitude to our lives and how we care for ourselves and others. And I know Andrea is doing a lot of things on the West Coast in that regard. I'd like to introduce you today. Thanks for joining us on the Coach MD podcast, Dr. Andrea.
Thank you so much, Dr. Charles. It's an honor to be here. And you and I are just riding in the same boat. Everything that you say, I'm just like, yes, this is
Right.
exactly what my experience is. I love your concept of empowering people to, make the better decisions for themselves rather than being kind of ignorant or ignoring their real choices that they could make that would lead them to not even need us in the first place.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Great.
from a doctor's standpoint, but I do think everyone needs a coach. Even coaches need coaches. So I think it's incredible that your patients can come to you or have been able to come to you in the past, and have gotten more than they probably expected. So thank
Yeah.
you so much for providing that.
Yeah, and I know that when someone comes to you, and as they did for me over the years, and they come to you with a problem. Okay, Dr. Andrea, fix this. My back hurts, or my neck is whatever. And knowing and looking over the stuff that you're doing now, I know that you kind of know that something else is going on. I mean, yeah, sure, there are things that you need fixing. I mean, don't get me wrong. I know there are some things that are out of place and that need to be corrected acutely. But I mean, when someone has kind of a chronic situation, uh, it's usually something else. And I know that that's what I'm interested in. That's what you're interested in. And tell me a little bit about, what you're doing in that regard as far as people's lives go, because you're doing more than just chiropractic. You are helping people kind of live their lives in a more intuitive way, in a more uh, kind of self-interested way, or one of self-knowledge. So
Yeah.
what's that about? What are you doing these
Well,
days?
yeah, you've nailed all these amazing points here. And I think that the first thing we can talk about is, yeah, it's not always, it is sometimes just like there's an acute structural issue that we have to address, right? And as a chiropractor, I see that all the time. But what creates that? And I always think it's never something that's, sudden, other than maybe a car accident or something like that. But
Right.
your body is the embodiment of your thoughts, feelings, and experiences. So,
Mhm.
what you bring to Dr. Charles is something that has been growing and growing for many, many years, most likely. And there is always a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual component to our
Mm.
health. As human beings, we exist on those four planes of existence. You can't have full, true, authentic health and feel truly fulfilled and whole without training, strengthening on all four planes. And so that's what we teach at Lifted Academy. My husband and I run Lifted Academy, and I teach the emotional side, the emotional sobriety side, and he teaches the physical strength and the physical, nutrition, because our emotions are, our emotional development it's like an untapped emotional development that we have as humans. That's the only way I can describe it. And I didn't really realize that until, gosh, I've been in practice for 20 years now, but didn't really realize that until about 13 years ago,
Mm.
that everyone is coming with the exact same problems in their relationships, in their bodies, the way that they eat, the way that they feel. And I recognized that as a pattern. So, for me, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to become a life coach too. So I never got a life coaching credential. Like, I never
Right.
did any of that. I just went off my gut instinct and
Mhm.
my wisdom that I was blessed with at the time, and recognized very shortly thereafter that it wasn't that they had to just be coached by me. It was that they needed to take responsibility for their emotional state. And I didn't realize this until I realized that I was really struggling with my own emotional issues in romantic relationship,
Mhm.
and had kind of become voiceless and avoidant, and had these really weird tendencies that were harmful to me and others that I never really looked at. And so I realized I never looked at it because everybody else had the same thing. So it's this very common line that we all walk. And when I figured out how to overcome that myself, calling it what it was, I was emotionally unsober. I
Mm.
was,
I like
right?
that.
I was, yeah,
Yeah.
I wasn't an alcoholic. I wasn't a drug addict. Thank God. That doesn't mean I never partook in alcohol, guys, just so you know.
Mhm.
But I was definitely under the influence of my emotions. And I recognized, as a doctor, emotions are chemicals, and we can become addicted to any chemical. So, wow, I am absolutely addicted to shame and to resentment and to embarrassment and to sadness and fear. Like, there are components of those that I was more so predisposed to making, but for me, fear, sadness, and embarrassment were my top three. And I recognize in every single person I spoke with, they were the same. They were all coming to me with the exact same theme, and the one commonality we have as human beings is that I believe we are all the same when it comes to the pattern through which we become emotionally unsober. And so that's what I kind of discovered, uncovered, and now I teach people to find their exact in sobriety and how to train to become emotionally sober.
Mm. Yeah, I love that, Andrea. It really, I mean, like you said, that everything I said, you could do. I mean, everything you're saying is like music to my ears. It's great to hear like-minded individuals who are stepping up and who see these things. Because I know in my development toward uh, guiding people along, guiding my patients along, I was in a really bad kind of regular medical practice for the first 14 years of my practice. Um, it was the usual in and out 30 to 40 patients a week, just miserable. And I became one of the first docs in 2002 to start a concierge practice, a retainer-based practice. There weren't many in the United States. I was the like ninth or 10th doctor in the United States to do that. But at that point, I was able to take a step back and start talking to people, and they would come to me and say how great they felt when they were in my office, but then they go back into their lives and things would fall apart. And they ask, was there something I could do to help kind of keep them straight? And so I started writing an email, which morphed into longer email list, and eventually my first book that I self-published, Brain Drain. And it was thank you. It was people would say, like, I had 4 young children and busy household. People would say, how do you find time for that? And that was my therapy, because I would write about deeply personal things. I would look into myself, what would get me anxious? What would get me sad? What would get me angry? And I had to figure out and kind of put together in my analytical brain. I'd have to put together and figure it out. So um, I became, more of coaching and helping people in that way. And what you say with the emotions and the spirit, it's so important for us to understand that yes, we are a physical body, but and like you said, it's an electrochemical reaction. The fight or flight response is an electrochemical reaction. And I like to look at, and when you say everybody's the same, I agree. We all have what I call our primitive nature, our animalistic nature, and then we have our divine nature, our spiritual nature. And that the animal nature runs on autopilot, fight or flight. And so we develop patterns. And what you're talking about, which I love, is this idea of sobriety and being addicted. Basically, this addiction is our comfort zone. And anything outside that comfort zone, if you think about it, when we go into something that is unfamiliar, unusual, uncomfortable, right? That to our brain, it detects danger. And what does the brain do when danger? It fights or flees, and it makes us fight or flee right back into that comfortable, into that familiar, into those patterns. So yeah, I love that you focus on that, and you don't, and with your husband, the physical, which obviously it's mind, body, spirit, and some of the other components that you work on. Yeah, I love that. This is it. Basically, Andrew, we have a love fest going on. We
It's
we
huge.
right. We are definitely on the same wavelength as
Same exact.
practitioners, if you will, coaches or whatever.
Absolutely. And you know what, too? When I'm hearing you speak, it's such a mirror of what I did because you said I looked within myself and, physician heal thyself. That I feel like that statement isn't just like physician, you have to heal yourself because nobody else can because you're the physician. It's heal yourself and you'll know how to heal everyone else.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
You figure it out on you and everybody is the same. And so that's exactly what I did too, sir. Like I completely went within and I'm like, where am I full of crap? What am I actually doing? What am I actually feeling? Not what I think my boyfriend wants me to feel or what I think my parents think I should feel or
Mm,
do or say. What's actually real? So, getting real is a huge component of getting on top of your emotional state because our emotional state really dictates the quality of our life.
yeah.
It truly, truly
Yes.
does. It doesn't matter if you live in a cave or if you have $8 billion. If you're happy, you're healthy.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's really important. So also on that same point, if we have, habits or behaviors that come from our emotional state, I call them emotionally triggered behaviors, right? We are
Yeah.
flooded with emotions. We're triggered then to drink alcohol to change our emotions, or to fight with our partner, or to get defensive and childish. Maybe we become jealous or judgmental. There's so many things, and there's a lot of things in those behavioral components that actually lead us to secondary addiction, like drugs and alcohol, like, compulsive gambling and things like that.
Mm.
But if our emotional state is not under our own control, how can we expect to have control over our lives? Because what controls how you feel controls you. I mean, tell me this, Doc. How many times has someone come into your office or into your coaching office and said, "Hey, my partner, da 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 da," or
Right.
"My kids, da 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 da," and you're like, "Well, here's the thing. Um, you're giving them control over you because you've handed them the keys to your emotional state." And so
Hmm.
our job is to reverse their perspective, shift their maturity level, if you want to call it that, and allow them to train that animal brain, to
Hmm.
change it so that now you're the leader of your life. You're the leader of your emotional state. And if you're the leader of your emotional state, guess what? You're now in control of all your chemistry, right?
Yeah.
Aside from the nutrition, which we're going to touch on. But
Yeah.
I think that's super important that people have that empowerment, because otherwise, right, what are they doing? They're paying a temporary friend to
Hmm.
tell them, "Hey, I'm so sorry that's happening to you." Or, "Oh gosh, yeah, tell me more." I don't want to give you a temporary friend. I want to give you a permanent solution.
Mm. Yeah. Oh, I love that, Andrea. That and I know, doing this kind of work and being interested in this is very compassionate. It tells me that you're a caring person because you see the suffering out there, and I feel the same way. I always felt the same way, but in order to, a lot of people like to say, "Oh, I'm a kind person. I help so many people. I volunteer all the time." But a lot of times that when people are driven to help others, okay, they neglect the person that needs the help the most in a way, and it's themselves, because we know how hard it is to change ourselves. So a lot of people know how hard it is, so they go and they try to change other people. And to me, it just screams that, okay, it's very difficult to change yourself. So I'm going to just distract myself with all other types of activity. One of the things I like to say is that, for truly, if you just want two concepts. If somebody just wants to, if they come to me and they say, "Okay, doc, just I don't want all this other, gobbledygook. I don't want, this psychobabble or whatever. Just give me two things that I need to do." And what I'll say is, okay, you need self-discipline and you need self-honesty.
Yeah.
And the self-honesty part is the one that people will not, they just don't accept. The
Yeah.
accountability,
They don't know
it's
how.
they don't. So I'm sure you have people like this. How do you
Yes.
deal with that? With
I would say that is the whole of what I teach, is how to teach. I teach people how to find what's real.
Mm,
That self-honesty component. And again, like, I love what you said. If you gave me just two things,
right.
my two things, that's a great question, because my two things would probably be: get over yourself. And what that means to me is something totally different than maybe other people. It means if you're suffering, you're in self-centeredness.
Mm,
Now, I just want to explain.
yeah.
Self-centeredness is not the same as selfishness.
Hmm.
Self-centeredness is when everything's about you. I'm suffering because this person did this and now I feel this. Or
Mm,
this person didn't do this and now I feel this. Or they said this and now I feel this. And what that means is, when we're stuck in the center of self, we're filtering everything through what I call our trauma influenced self belief. So the beliefs we brought in from childhood, either that we experienced, that we delivered, or that we observed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it could be a trauma, it could be some kind of a issue that you observed, it could be something that, let's see, I'm looking for the word here. It could just be anything where you mimic
Mm-hmm.
a belief from your mom or your dad or something that happened. You interpreted something as a child and you brought it into your adulthood. Now, here's the problem with that is that if I'm talking to you through this filter, I'm now speaking to you and experiencing you and myself through a filter that was created by a child
Mm-hmm.
with no wisdom, no experience, just, and everything's about you when you're a kid. It has to be. You are observing the world and saying, okay, how do I do this? How do I do that? What do I think about this? What do I feel about that? I'm going to mimic the world around me so I can survive in my tribe. And so the first thing I would have you do if you're suffering, get over yourself. Get over that self-belief, get out of the center of self. And like, I love that you touched on the spiritual because it's like almost like getting out of your body
Mm-hmm.
and or being above your body in your soul or your spirit and looking down and saying, okay, what's actually happening right now? If I'm suffering, I'm making something about me. I'm resentful, I'm frustrated, I'm disappointed, I'm judging somebody else. If I can just get over myself and remove that filter, I'm going to have a completely new perspective and I'm going to feel different in my chemistry. And then the second thing I would have someone do is check their motive.
Explain that. That sounds good. I like that.
So, yes,
Yeah.
you're checking your motive actually is like the fastest way to sober up in the moment. So, if you and I are having an argument, sir, and I say, what am I hoping to accomplish by having this conversation with him? What am I hoping to accomplish by saying it that way? Right? What am I hoping to accomplish by, you know, using that word or that tone? What it is now I have to look in myself and find the truth. I have to be self-honest. And when I do that, it takes me to a totally new dimension. I'm no longer in the center of self. I'm above myself. So checking motive is like the cheat sheet. It's the hack. It's the fastest way to get present and to get yourself into a place of real. And so I want to touch on what you said too earlier. You said something about like we always want to change others when we can't heal ourselves. And I know why that is. And my husband calls that in our school, we call that cued, CUED. There is a concept that we find, that is maybe like in front of our face. So let's say there's a concept of emotional sobriety. Let's just use as an example. Mm-hmm. And if we're interested in that, we might dig deeper into it. We might take a class, we might read on it, write an article. And so now we understand. So we have the concept and now we understand. Some people just get to the concept, they're like, oh, that's not for me. But when we really start to dig in, now you understand. So once you understand, you have to go into the embodiment. You have to choose to embody that concept as a part of you and practice it in your life in the day-to-day, moment-to-moment. Most people stop at understand because we're an information-packed, culture right now. Mm-hmm. If I can talk to you and sound smart, if I can give you something that I think is going to help you, then that makes me feel good. It makes me have dopamine. Mm-hmm. I feel superior. I feel better than. And so I get this momentary relief. But when people don't have the opportunity to embody or they don't choose to embody it, then they never actually heal. So what it is, it's concept, understanding, embodiment, and demonstration. If you embody something enough, you actually will become the demonstration of it. So now it took me a long time to become emotionally sober, and I still consider it a practice. But things just don't bother me the way that I just never get worked up. It would take something so severe to get me to have some kind of emotional reaction that I didn't choose. And I would say now I'm the demonstration of emotional sobriety. And if I weren't currently acting in a space of emotional sobriety, I would very quickly adapt and change that into an embodiment demonstration. But yeah, you're right. People get stuck in the understanding phase and think that that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. I know it now. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean you be it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's great. And I, I love, how you talk about the childhood, and because that's really where I went when I was doing my self exploration, when I started my writing, when I started to try to simplify my own being, really, and try to understand why certain things happen to me. And really, what got me going on this with the idea of the fight or flight is, and then going back to childhood, which I'm going to talk about in a second as it relates to what you're talking about. When I was in second year medical school, it was coming down to the um, our first board exam. And in medical school, there are three board exams. There's first one is after the second year. The sec wait, oh no, there's two. No, the first is after your second year. The second is after your internship year, and the third is, I guess, your board exam. I think I got them all. There might be a fourth one in there. I'm not sure. But at the end of the second year, I asked my roommate if he could take my blood pressure because I felt my heart skip a beat. I mean, everybody's heart is. I mean,
Of course.
know now as a doctor, it's benign PVC or whatever. But I was a medical student. I was studying for the boards. I was going over everything, every pathological thing. So I said, take my blood pressure. And he got my blood pressure 130/80. Now, if anybody, and my pulse was like 60 or whatever. So if anybody knows blood pressure, that's not so bad, really. I mean, 120/80 is pretty considered normal. There's, you know, but I'm a second year medical student thinking that everything is heart disease or cancer or whatever. I freaked out. Right. I called my parents. They took me to a cardiologist that weekend. Now my blood pressure is going up, forget it. So ever since that point, right, I had this white coat syndrome, right? That anytime someone came, I finally have broken it. I think I have, okay? But and I don't have high blood pressure. My blood pressure is if anything, it's on the low side. So, but when someone comes after me, like, with this in their hand, oh my God, I'm going to take your blood pressure. I feel this sensation come over me. And so that's not real danger. Yet my body is responding like it's real danger because that's what the primitive instinct does. That's what animals do when they fight or flee. Their blood pressure goes up, pulse goes up, their respirations go up, all that stuff. And then, so when I was starting to do my writing, and I thought back as far as me being a doctor and what I grew up with as a child. Now, I didn't grow up in a traumatic childhood, but I did grow up in an emotional childhood that framed what was going to be familiar to me, what was going to be comfortable to me, and what was going to be what I knew I needed to do to earn love, because our primitive brain interprets love as security. Well, security is love. We get it confused. But if that is jeopardized, then our brain will perceive danger and go into fight or flight. So I noticed when I was becoming a doctor, going into practice, I was starting to get more anxiety. And I didn't really know what that was about until I started coming self-honest, looking at my life and looking at the fact that it was a competition with my parents. And so it was really this is what, sometimes these um the mechanisms of what we're feeling, our emotional state, it's really hard to get to. But you touched upon it when you said the childhood, it's in a child's brain. So my child brain was, I'm a doctor, I'm successful, I may out earn my parents. That's going to threaten the love I'm going to get from my
Yes.
parents. So I'm going to fight and flee, and I'm not going to not become a doctor, but I'm going to internalize it. And what is that internalization? It becomes anxiety. It becomes fear. It becomes, and very uncomfortable. And I'm very thankful that when we talk about the spiritual aspect of it, so we have the fight or flight, which I say is the animalistic, but then we have our higher consciousness, which is like you said, you're able to look down and say, okay, this is not right. This is primitive. This is automatic. This is like the animals in the wild. This doesn't belong to me. And then kind of do some of I like your structure, how you do this, because this can help people take what was familiar to me and what was comfortable to me was getting that love of maybe underachieving, let's say, and and that was a comfortable thing. So I was going out of my comfort zone, that I learned, that I internalized, that my brain developing from uh, birth to adolescence, because that's really when the brain is formed. So most of these people that you're dealing with, most of the people I'm dealing with, and dealing with myself included, is that child brain, that childlike brain reacting fight or flight to circumstances as adults. And
Yeah.
so but it's easy to say. And I think that um trying to figure it out in myself, that helped me a lot. But I know it doesn't always help everybody, just that knowledge, that understanding, like you said,
Yes.
you really have to demonstrate it, you have to live it, and once you've done it in yourself, then you could teach it, right? So,
Absolutely.
the saying is that in order to learn, you must be taught. In order to master, you must teach. So once you have learned it, then it's important to pass it on. I think that's when it's appropriate to pass it on, to teach, rather than not doing the work yourself, not doing the understanding, and then going on to teach it.
Absolutely. That's such a great story and example, by the way, because, when you're telling me about the blood pressure and everything, I think, oh, maybe it's something where when you're a child, being tested makes you have fear because you believe you're not going to do a good enough job, or you're going to be criticized, or you're going to be shamed. And so you're going through this boards process, and it's like, oh God, if I don't do it right, what if I'm not, what if I fail? What does that mean about me?
Yeah,
And so
I want to
that's
interrupt for 1 second because I want to add something to
yes.
that story. And it was the story I heard growing up, that my uncle died of a heart attack at 42. My grandfather died of a heart attack at 42. So health and the fear of health and the fear of ill health,
Mm,
that was enough to feed that fear loop, because
yeah.
it's because that's what the fight or flight needs, because adrenaline, the chemicals only last in your system maybe 5 minutes or whatever, and then they're broken up unless you keep feeding it. So that fear
Yes.
of learning. So go ahead, continue. I just wanted to add that piece to it.
You just like lob them down the middle for me.
Right.
But yeah, the adrenaline, the chemical, it's like it's here and it's gone. It's supposed to be quick. It's supposed to get you out of Dodge, right?
Hmm.
And so what happens is I call it anchoring the chemical with a thought.
Mm,
You can wake up with anxiety, and the only reason that you keep the anxiety is because you match it with a thought. You
mm,
match it about your day, what's going to
mm.
happen. You match it about your financial situation. You match it about something you did that was stupid in the past, that time that you got super drunk, like whatever it was.
Right,
Like
right,
you're looking
right.
at all these different angles of
Yeah,
what could sustain this misery,
right.
and it's
Yeah.
it's pretty powerful when you learn that that's all that is, and you get the right tools to actually put into training. All of a sudden it's just not a part of your life anymore, and you're completely free. We don't recognize it. Like 99% of the time we're not even in control of our lives.
Hmm.
What controls how you feel controls you. So if you don't have any control over your emotional state, that means you don't have control over you.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. I love that. I mean, it's true. And we're talking, and what you're really referring to is what the masses, how we're distracted by so many other things outside our home. And I like to say, in order to reach for the stars, we first must have both feet planted firmly on the ground. And that ground is our home, that ground is ourselves, our family, our friends, our local. So, I mean, we're so concerned about everything that we can't control. And we totally miss what we can control. But like you're saying, though, sometimes our emotions, that this fight or flight, it's so, I mean, the physical, and I mean, you see it as a chiropractor with the way the muscles are in chronic tension and
Yeah.
contraction, and what they do to the skeletal muscle, I mean, our skeletal structure. And, that constant fight or flight is keeps us stuck and keeps us in those fear loops. And you're saying how you attach it with a thought, and those thoughts are will keep us locked. What I've been doing lately is, especially when I walk my dog every morning, is a beautiful time to be outside. And again, if you want to be distracted, don't be distracted by the news. Go outside and be distracted by nature. That's a
Yes.
great distraction. That's a beautiful, or exercise. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But it really, I have this all or nothing now. Okay, so to me, when I have a thought that I know is coming from my primitive brain, I call it, coming, trying to hold me back from childhood, whatever, because those things are still existing. I have this all or none now. So I'm either going to believe what I believe 100%, and I'm not going to believe at all 0% that thought that comes in that's trying to sabotage me. That's a familiar pattern that I may have developed to kind of sabotage my success. I mean, because that was a reflex for me for a long time, was to sabotage, because I didn't want to outdo anybody. I didn't want to, especially my family, I didn't want to make them feel badly, whatever. Meanwhile, my family they want me to be successful, but that's my child brain, right?
Yeah.
That's what I learned as a child. I observed that it
Yes.
seemed as though if I didn't call home, or if I didn't, and I don't blame my parents. This is not
No,
about
it's
blame,
not their
because
fault. Yeah.
it's a child's interpretation of the world. You could have the perfect, okay, we know that there's no perfect, but you could have the perfect childhood, perfect parents, perfect everything. And it doesn't matter, because your childish brain is what's putting these connections together. And I like to use this
Yes.
example that I made an association that was completely ridiculous. Okay. When I was, and this will date me, right? So I was almost 4 years old in 1963. Okay. So when President Kennedy was shot, and my family lived in Washington, D.C. at the time, and my uncle was involved in the Kennedy administration. So even as a almost 4 year old, the name was in our family. I was hearing it, whatever. And then, so on that November day in 1963, my mother, I'm in and I remember it only because I've told it a million times. I don't have a vivid memory of that, but
Yeah.
we're in the of a, small apartment. I'm in the living area, and my mother comes from the balcony. Oh my God, the president's been shot. Okay, so I mean I mean, we have a child here, you don't react that way, but this was my mother reacting that way. Oh my God. Almost simultaneously, I heard an ambulance go by. And I'm telling you that I thought for so long, no matter when I learned that he was shot in Dallas, it didn't even matter. I may have learned that in middle school.
Yeah.
I thought that I had heard the ambulance that Kennedy was in. And even when I knew that it couldn't have been, it still was in there. Like, I couldn't jar it. I
It was
still
real.
It was real. And I think I probably even repeated that even when I knew better, only because it was so locked in there. And that might, that's kind of a nothing, kind of lockdown association. But think about growing up in a traumatic household, or think about a household where it's familiar for your parents to be fighting all the time. And then as an adult, you get in a relationship where it's a nice and calm relationship, that's unfamiliar. Your
Yes.
brain, your brain may cause you to fight and flee that because it's unfamiliar to you, to your child brain. But we all are carrying that child brain. I know that. I know just by the work you do, that is
Yeah.
something that
It's
you know.
huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. And that's something I have people do. We get that out of the way. It's like, let's look at your childhood. Let's look at the things that you believe about yourself now that aren't true because of what your child brain interpreted as to be true. And see where that limits you in your life, and see where that floods you with chemistry, and see where that chemistry makes you act belligerent. See where that chemistry makes you do things you would never consciously choose. And what that motive was for using those behaviors. And when you can see it straight in front of your face, now you have the opportunity to say, oh, I don't need to do that anymore. And when I know what I'm looking for, I can edit it when it comes up. And I give, so many tools and so much hard training that people can utilize to experience a new version of themselves. And I bring that up because you said earlier about self-sabotage. I like to think I teach people to be limitless.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean they're never going to feel or come a bump up against a limit. It means I want you to feel the limit and instantly overcome that limit. And here's how. Because there's so many things, right? Like, oh, you just need to be free and fulfilled and find your purpose. But how?
Yeah.
But how? And I know you're like, let's find the how and let's do it, right? And you have to do it on yourself first. So the limitless thing, but you mentioned self-sabotage before, and I love that because I have a podcast called Level Headed Talk, and I have I'm on the air every morning, every weekday morning for very short blurbs for my students. Yes. And every week we have a theme, right? It wasn't always that way, but we do that now. We've done that for the past several years. But there's one whole week about self-sabotage. And the reason I chose to talk about that is because I don't believe self-sabotage actually exists.
Okay, tell me. Tell me more.
I believe I believe there's a real Dr. Charles, there's you, and then there's the version of you that comes out when you're intoxicated on emotion. And that version of you that's intoxicated on emotion, I call the intoxicated identity, right? So the intoxicated identity will be flooded with emotion because it believed something from the past to be happening now, and it will behave in a way that you would never consciously choose. It will come up against that limit and it will stay behind that wall. If you could overcome that intoxicated identity, guess who's climbing that wall? That wall just disappears,
Love that.
actually.
Love that.
And so, yeah, it's the intoxicated identity or the ego, essentially, that does sabotage your progress because it doesn't feel safe, right? Like you said, or it feels offended. And it drives its heels into the ground. And it's like, no, I'm not going to forgive that person. And I also teach people how to forgive, which is a very, very interesting thing when you get a group full of people in a group of people in a room and nobody wants to forgive. And by the end of the class, everybody has forgiven the person that they can't forgive in the beginning. So I'm telling you, as long as you know the how and you have the desire, you can do anything.
Yeah.
You really can.
Yeah.
So cool. I think the biggest component of emotional sobriety to me is that the secret to healing, in my experience, is humility. And humility, again, like self-centeredness is not selfishness. Humility is not self-deprecation. It's not making yourself smaller than everyone else or inferior. It's not being a doormat. Humility is seeing that we're all the same. I'm no better than you. You're no better than me. We're all good. We're all the same in our emotional insobriety and our reasons for having it, even if we have different flavors. That guy over there who's physically abusive is on the same level as I am because I've been maybe verbally abusive or been given the silent treatment. We're all abusive at some point in our life because of our intoxicated identity or our Hulk self, right? Our version that is either harmful, abusive toward ourselves or harmful to other people. And so even though somebody else's insobriety behavior may be more severe, if we're measuring. It doesn't change the fact that the mechanism is the same. And that's what keeps me humble. And one thing that I like to do too is when I'm teaching forgiveness is recognizing the fact that you probably haven't made your last mistake. And you better hope that the person that you make the mistake with is humble and understands this mechanism.
Mm,
Right.
yeah.
So, especially like today, right? It's cancel culture.
Right.
Everyone's
Yeah.
getting canceled. You could
Yep.
be the coolest guy in town, and if you do one thing that's judgeable, you're out. You're
Yeah.
out of the picture. And I want to cancel culture because it's the opposite of humility.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
the opposite of
Oh, yeah.
redemption, which
Of
is my
course.
favorite word. And so I like to tell people when they bring me someone that they've canceled, I'd say, well, okay, well, that's totally your choice, but are you sure that you've made your last and worst mistake?
Yeah. Right.
Because
Yeah.
until then, baby, you better call that guy back and be like, hey, you did this, which sucks, but let's redeem you. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
let's try to fix it.
Yeah. No, I love that. And, you know, I look at my own life, and again, you have to be have that self honesty. You have to have that self awareness, and I look at how I was when I was a teenager or a young adult, and how I had so many insecurities, and that the idea of humility is so important to my life, and it's so funny because now I'm at a point in my life that it's though, so many, I'm gonna figure out a way to say this, but, I was the kid who probably other kids felt good about themselves because I was below them in a sense, right? And now I'm, above whatever. I don't look at it like that, never look at it like that. I
You're
never look at it like
successful.
right. Successful, I don't look at, I never look at myself as being better or higher, whatever, because of that, how we're all the same. I mean, if you all, I know going into New York, I look around and I say, if you believe in God, you believe God is in everyone or God is in no one. So I look around and I say, well, God is in that person, that person, that person, no more than I am. Because if you do believe in that higher power, that then you have to believe that you cannot be any better. So, but getting back to the humility and forgiveness, there's a saying that I learned when I was writing, when I started bearing my soul and telling my personal weaknesses or insecurities, whatever. I noticed that people would respond better to me. They would open up to me better. And so vulnerability is my greatest asset. That's what I,
I just
yeah.
I just wrote the word vulnerability on my page here
I
because you
love
are
it.
so right. So
Yeah.
vulnerability is
Yeah,
100%.
it
When
is.
when
So,
I'm yeah, go ahead.
oh yeah, no, yeah, I'm just, vulnerability is the greatest asset. So being humble doesn't mean, like you said, being a doormat. Okay. So I know that. So when you look at doctors and you talk about ego and so many, that's a complaint for so many, that doctors have the ego. The only reason why they have the ego, it's really that their own insecurity. I had that insecurity growing up through my young adulthood. I addressed it by self-awareness, by self-honesty. It allowed me, and also a spiritual connection and a deep belief in something greater than myself. And so, but knowing that, I'm very humble and I'll always be humble, but I'll never let somebody who's not humble, who hasn't learned that, walk all over me. So I used to be very afraid of these big doctors, and especially growing up in the home I grew up in. I Doctors were always like, "Whoa, they're up there, they're untouchable." And not feeling you can really relate to them, and so when I was walked in the hospital for the first time and I felt kind of below and inferior. But then I realized that these I'm going to be afraid of this guy. You got to be kidding me. I see what's going on. I see who they really are as people, whatever. And I'm not saying all doctors, whatever, but just
Yeah, yeah,
the people who used to intimidate me no longer intimidate me at all. And it's a strength. It's a superpower, if you will, the
it is.
humility and the vulnerability. It can actually be a superpower. So yeah, go ahead. What you were going to say about the,
100%.
yeah.
You just nailed that because, arrogance is just false confidence. So if
Mm,
somebody doesn't feel confident in themselves because of something in their past, they're probably just like a little 7-year-old who's trying to play a part. They think
yeah.
they're supposed to present themselves in a certain way. That's not their real self. And so when you're humble, you know that because you've done the work on yourself to see the little areas that you've maybe been false. And you see it in someone else and you go, oh my God, like I see it. I'm not going to judge them. I'm also not going to let them walk all over me, right? I'm going
Right.
to be very, very calm and all those things. But vulnerability is so big. And I want to touch on that because it's such a healer as well as like humility. You have to be humble and you have to be courageous to be vulnerable. Because, like for me, in my book, I wrote a book called The You You've Never Met. And in The You You've Never Met, there is like the first 2 chapters, basically me telling you all the things that I've done that are
Mm,
just like, wow, Andrea, like really? I mean, I've made huge mistakes. I've hurt people. I've lied. I've been totally hysterically jealous. I mean, so many things. Don't
right.
get me started. I'll be here all day. Not perfect, right? Doesn't exist. So I recognize like when I'm speaking, if I'm giving keynotes, if I'm teaching a course, like I'm so vulnerable and it makes people instantly want to mimic that.
Mm,
It's like,
yeah.
wait, what? You too? Oh, I can talk about that? That's okay? Yeah, because what happens
Yeah.
when we swallow the things that we've done? We get sick. We
Yeah.
get sick and we have to go see Dr. Charles here
Right.
because
Right.
we are like, what's going on with my body, doc? My body's failing me. No, your body's not failing you. Your body's doing exactly what you've told it to do.
Mm,
It's flooded with chemistry, full of toxins,
hmm.
full of negative thinking. And now this is the embodiment of that.
Yeah.
Here's what you've created. So when you're vulnerable, it's like a detox.
Yeah. It is. It is. And I noticed that when I was, like I said, when I was doing the writing, and I there's another great example. I have a friend who's a kind of a big shot banker, or whatever, and he had a big, apartment. Everybody's afraid of him. Nice guy, but in where he's working, he's big shot. Nobody, really is kind of cold and people are afraid of him. But something personal happened, and there were a few people in the office when he got the phone call, and he teared up, and they saw that, and he was like, "Oh my God!" He was, kind of devastated that they saw him. But over the course of the next few days, the next couple of weeks, people were actually much nicer to him, feeling more kind. And he said that things changed for me.
Yeah.
It was like and I said it's because he was vulnerable
Yeah. He
and
showed himself the
he showed
real.
himself, and that was something that was much more special to them, and they connected with him much more because they looked at him as human, and they were better employees for it. So
Yes.
to be the big bad boss and to be the mean boss or whatever. And again, this doesn't, and you're saying this, and I agree, and I know this, and I know this is what you reinforce to people is that it's not a weakness, it's actually a strength. And once you recognize that, you will also recognize when somebody's not being that way and they're being insecure, they're being arrogant, and they're behaving in a way that is going to make you feel that way. And you could feel for them, and you could feel sorry for them. But it doesn't mean you have to, kowtow to them, whatever. And you have to stand up for yourself in an assertive way rather than an aggressive or a passive way, which I look at the aggression as the fight and the passivity as the flight, whereas being assertive is really acting consciously, acting.
It's leadership.
Yeah, that's a great way. Leadership. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, let's talk a little bit about, because like you said, the how is very important, and we can do the how. And I know that your academy teaches that, and definitely I'm going to have links in the description for all of that. And we're going to be in touch, I know, going forward. So, um, but there's also other things that we can do. And I know from the nutrition and the fitness, and just, for people to understand, right, about the nutrition and how that could affect your emotions. Just think about when you become hypoglycemic. Okay, when your blood sugar goes low, think how miserable you feel, right? You feel a little shaky, you feel fatigued, you feel angry or
You
hangry,
snap.
as they say, sad,
Yeah.
right? And so our nutrition, the balance of our nutrition can affect our emotions. And we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get into the fitness part, which is also something I'm, you know, passionate about as well. So
Oh,
tell me about a
yes.
little bit about what you and your husband are doing with the nutrition aspect of that.
Sure, yeah. So
Yeah,
my husband has been a world-renowned strength and conditioning coach for about 25 years. He's
nice.
had the top powerlifting team on the West Coast for that
Wow,
time.
cool.
But he does coach many, many other types of athletes, professional athletes, MMA champions, just general people. He has a wonderful product coming out soon called Timeless, and it's for people over the age of 50 so that they can have increased vitality. Yes,
Right.
exactly. We've got an incredible group of 70 plus at our local physical gym, which is the physical arm of Lifted Academy.
Mm,
But yeah, what one thing that he does is he created something called the body recomposition training. And that is where, yes, you lose body fat in a really fast period of time. Yes, you can build muscle and not lose muscle while you're losing fat. And all these things are great. Your body will be in a recomposed state. It will be more muscle to fat in very short time. But what he really teaches is how to speak the language of biochemistry back to your body using nutrition for the
mm,
exact reason that you're talking about right now. What you eat and when you eat it's something you can handle, something that you can control your input by your own hand. So anytime you can change or regulate or manage your chemistry by your own hand, take the opportunity. And so what he does is he has people eat on a certain rhythm, and he has a certain formula for which that they would eat, and teaches it over an 8-week process. It is phenomenal. It completely changed my life and many, many other people. And we've had people that have lost, 100 pounds to
mm,
just 25, gained 60 pounds muscle, depending on their goal. But the real reason is that he wants people to understand, like, every time you eat, there's a biochemical pulse or information that you're sending to your body, and you're telling it what chemical reaction that it should have. You're training your body. And like you said, if you have consistent blood sugar throughout the day, if your body's nourished in the exact amount that it needs to be, if you have control over the quality of food, then your chemistry already, you're going to have this solid foundation. And when you do the emotional training, it makes it that much easier because your foundation is solid. It's really hard for people to do the emotional training when their body's like this
mm.
from the foods. I'm
Absolutely.
pounding coffee all morning. I'm not eating. Then I eat something here and then I drink at night. It's like they're not taking responsibility for their chemicals and they don't know how to do it. And it's such a norm now. It's such a norm now to do the things I just described, to just live on coffee and alcohol and vaping and so one of the things that he does immediately, and anyone that's listening, don't freak out. Okay, don't freak out, but we got to remove, if you freak out, by the way, that's just your intoxicated identity. That's not you. Okay, if
Right.
you freak out, we remove what we call the main metabolic disruptors. Okay, the main disruptors that looks like caffeine, alcohol, marijuana, social media, in excess, the news, stuff like that. Things that are going to alter your chemistry in the negative and put you at a deficit. If you want to be a
Mm,
leader, you can't do any of that, period. You want to be a leader at home or a leader at work or a leader for your patients. You don't get to put your body through that and expect to be the best you.
mm.
So it's one of the sacrifices we make, but really, is it a sacrifice? Is it a sacrifice to stop doing something that's hurting you?
Right, right. I mean, it seems logical, right? I mean,
Right, totally.
yeah.
So there's a concept. I want you to understand. Yeah, okay, so understanding it is I shouldn't drink caffeine because of these reasons. We're going to give you actual reasons. I shouldn't drink alcohol because alcohol is never healthy. There's no
Mhm.
amount of alcohol that's healthy for your body, And so once you understand that, now you could choose to embody it and see it bear fruit in your life. See what happens when you kick the addiction, because it is alcohol, coffee, it's a drug,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And we become addicted to it. And so if you're having that moment of like, oh God, no, you can't take away my coffee or you can't take away my wine, that's just an addiction. And that's okay. We're all the same.
Yeah.
And you can just attempt to take it away from your life and notice how your life totally changes in the positive.
Yeah. Yeah. I look at these things as, distractions, as I mentioned before, that these substances that we use to distract us from the things in our life that may be difficult, that may be challenging. And, uh, the first reaction somebody might have is, oh my God, well, if I don't distract myself, then I'm going to just be totally overwhelmed by all of this. But really, you're going to be putting yourself in a better position to be. I love the idea of leader. Not only people think of leaders, oh, I'm going to be a leader. I want to be a big shot. I want to be a CEO. No, leader in your own household. I love that. That is beautiful. And I was walking my dog again, getting back to walking my dog. It's a very important part of my day. And in the park, I'm walking along, and this couple, they get out of their car. It's beautiful. We're very fortunate to have a beautiful small park in our neighborhood that I could walk to every morning. That, in fact, this morning it had rained last night, and my dog. I said, yeah, I don't know if I go to the park because it's going to be wet. So I start turning the corner to go home, and she's pulling me. She wants to go to the park. She's pulling me. She won't let me go make that turn because she wants to go to the park. And so I'm walking in the park, and this couple gets out of their car, and I'm saying, "See, it smells like a skunk." And I realize, nah, it's not a skunk. They're smoking pot. Like, you don't this is such a beautiful park. I have this app on my phone which identifies all the different birds. It's called Merlin. It's a great app. It identifies, you hear the bird call, and it'll light up on the phone what kind of bird it is. And just this morning, there were 20 different birds, species of birds that I was able to hear. And just listening to them, that's if that's a distraction. Okay, I don't need to be you're why don't smoke pot? Just take it all in. This'll if you're smoking to put you in you don't need an altered state of consciousness. You don't need
Yeah.
relaxation. This park will give you that if you just allow
Yes.
it to happen. So I
Gosh, that's
like how
so
you
great.
you focus on removing some of those things. And yeah, I mean that's so
Yeah,
key.
that's like the first thing that I would recommend for people. And what you said earlier really landed in me, which was when you were talking about if you're reaching for the stars, both feet need to be on the ground. That really like lit up my whole body. It's like, yes, that's so important because when I say being a leader, I don't mean bossing people around. I mean being the demonstration.
Mm,
Being the demonstration of emotional sobriety, of being approachable, of being vulnerable and humble, of being assertive, of being courageous and faithful, and all these things, not needing something outside of you to change how you feel inside of you. Like you said, those kids who were smoking, whoever was smoking, I'm assuming they're kids, um, they're changing something inside of them with something outside of them. And a lot of this happens too, where like you come home, and if you're coming home and you're saying, I can't wait to get to that wine, I can't wait to have a drink. I think of that as you're working so much or you're so unhappy and unfulfilled and discontent that your body is literally looking for a
mm,
forced relaxation. So, doing some different things for yourself, like eliminating the emotion that is creating you to need to drink the wine after work,
mhm.
because you have no idea how much energy you are giving up every day by feeling and making the chemicals that you're making, that you've been making since childhood, right? And the
Yeah.
thoughts that you're thinking to fuel those emotions. And so when you remove that, you have all this free space and all this potential. You're not going to need the alcohol. And when you wake up in the morning, you're exhausted from your life and you're like, I want to get high. Coffee gets you high. In
Yeah.
fact, a lot of people will say I can't give up coffee because when I'm on coffee, or when I'm not on coffee, I just don't feel on. When I'm not drinking coffee, I just don't feel as on. I'm like, yeah, because you're on drugs.
Mm.
Like literally. And I am telling you this with my heart open. I love coffee. I love it. I love the taste of wine, but I am not a good drunk. And I am not a great, it doesn't work for me.
Right.
And I'm also, no one needs to be on coffee. It doesn't, in fact, make you better at what you do. And
Yeah.
my husband, who I think you would absolutely love, by the way, so I'm going to connect you to,
Yeah.
he calls that when you drink coffee, you're taking out a high interest loan.
Yeah.
As a doctor, you know exactly
Yeah.
what I mean,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
I want to feel better right now, and
Hmm.
my adrenals are going to pay it back for the
Mm.
next week. And
Yeah.
then tomorrow, I'm going to need another cup and then maybe 2 cups. And I'm like any other human being. I am not perfect. We're all the same. If I were to have a cup of coffee tomorrow, I would think, oh, I could have another cup of coffee. Oh, and then maybe I'll have 2 cups of coffee. Now all of a sudden, I'm drinking 3 cups of coffee and I'm not feeling good. Even though I'm
Yeah.
emotionally stable, I still feel the adrenaline or the cortisol in my body from the
Hmm.
caffeine.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it was pretty easy because I never drank coffee. Okay.
nice.
But I did try. Don't get me wrong. I tried
Give
because
it a shot.
yeah, I mean, I was in college. Everybody's drinking coffee. And my senior year, we go down to Fort Lauderdale, having a great old time, driving back, 26 hours to the New York area. And we, I forgot what it was, like midnight, and we're someplace in New Jersey because we're going to drive into the city. Maybe the car broke down. No, that's right. We were dropped off. Right. Our friend dropped us off near the train to go into New York. And it was midnight and we had to wait for the train. And there was a diner. And I said, okay, if there's any better time to drink coffee, it's going to be now. Okay. So we go into the diner and like, I'm 21 years old, whatever, and I'm feeling really adult. I'll have a coffee, right? And so they bring the 2 coffees, one for my friend, one for I took one sip and I just didn't like it, right? And in order to like it, you got to put the sugar in it, you got to put the milk in it, but I wasn't going to do that. So I did try later on, even a few years later, but then it was getting to be like if you're going to drink coffee, you're drinking a milkshake. I mean, you're putting in all
Yeah,
this
might as well.
stuff. Yeah. So I didn't want to do that. And, I got into the habit of fasting, this probably the last 20, 25 years, where I eat like 9 o'clock at night or whatever, and don't eat again till noon the next day. And I've been doing that for years. And I never had coffee in the morning. I would drink water. I would sometimes drink tea. Occasionally I drink green tea, which is caffeinated, but I usually would not even drink caffeine. And when you get used to it, people say, "Oh no, I could never do that. You're just different." I'm telling you, I'm not different. I mean, I
No.
was not any type of no. If you knew me that way back when, okay, not that there was something like this going on in my high school, but if there was a uh, some type of survey, like who is the least likely to succeed, okay, my name probably, I don't know if it would come up, but it wouldn't have been the most likely to succeed. I can guarantee you that. All right. So, my point is that, when I say that, I don't need anything, or I don't have any coffee, like somehow I've always, super motivated, whatever. No, I mean, I think I embody somebody who has learned and has overcome. And I think that that's a really important point. Like you were talking about your personal stuff and having to know about it and all that, and how when you share that, people respond better. And I think that that's a really good, way to put it. So, way to look at it. I mean, with your experience, I imagine.
Ab-
Yeah,
Absolutely. I feel like people need to know, like I understand what it's like to feel like you need a glass of wine or you want coffee, you want something to do it for you.
yeah, yeah,
You want to
exactly.
take the easy way out, but trust me, it's actually easier to do it yourself.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
actually more freeing. I mean, this is why my book is called The You You've Never Met, because the reason you drink, do drugs, lie, get jealous, get defensive, snappy, childish, you name it, is because you just don't believe that you could be something different, or you don't really know how to be something different.
yeah,
And both of those things are just right at your fingertips. You know me
yeah.
and coach here. We're good.
Right.
You're good. Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's just
yeah,
about recognizing we're all the same. I love what you said. I'm not like different. I'm not a superhuman
yeah.
to not need coffee. I just never got addicted to it.
Right. Thankfully,
Yeah.
and it's um the whole idea of mind, body, spirit, and I really love how it's Lift Academy. Is that what it's called? The
Lifted.
Lifted Academy, because you're
Yes.
lifting both spirits and you're with your husband with the actual lifting. And I know from a fitness point of view, so I'm in my mid 60s now, right? I mean, it blows me away, but I feel like I'm more fit now
Yeah.
than I was 20 years ago. And that's because of the fitness that I've done. And my particular brand is, I like to do CrossFit, but CrossFit is just a name brand of old types of functional workouts, and that does include lifting. But I know that if somebody wants a quick fix, like they say, what you're talking about, Andrea, I don't know, it's going to take time, whatever. But if you want a quick fix, do those things that you're talking about as far as
Yes.
eliminating those things, with your nutrition, and start moving, exercise. I know,
Yes.
like for me, I I mean, when I work out, I feel so energized and I feel
Yeah.
so good. I remember,
Like you're buzzing.
yeah, yesterday was such a dreary day here in the New York area, and and I didn't work out. I felt really like tired. I was like out of sorts. So I was really looking forward to this morning, my workout this morning, and I was just looking forward to it afterwards. Man, it was awesome. So that is, if you want those quick fixes just to get you going, I think that what you're talking about is great, and incorporating everything that you do. Yeah,
Thank
Andrew,
you.
man, it's been so good to connect with you. It's
I know we could talk another 6 hours, but
absolutely, yeah, yeah. And we almost did with that mix
right.
up I made on the scheduler, which is, yeah, it's little funky things. I don't know. I guess it was meant to happen this way, but
Yeah.
yeah. So we'll definitely keep in touch. I'll leave all the links in the description with how to get in touch with you, and I'm looking forward to staying in touch. And yeah, thank you for all you do, Andrew. I really appreciate it.
You too. Thank you for having me. It was an honor. I look
Yeah,
forward to
so
hearing from you again.
absolutely. And this the Coach MD podcast. And as you know, I am Dr. Charles, aka Coach MD, urging you to stay strong in mind, in body, and especially in soul. Bye for now.